What if the galaxy's most feared predators, ruthless alien hunters who conquered worlds for sport, set their sights on Earth, thinking we were nothing but easy prey? They came expecting a slaughter, but what they got was a global uprising that would shake the stars. In this powerful story of survival, rebellion, and human strength, witness how an underestimated planet becomes the spark that ignites a galactic revolution. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's dive into this unforgettable journey. Far from Earth, deep in the darkness of space, a shadow drifted silently among the stars. It was not a meteor or a forgotten satellite. It was something far more dangerous. A ship belonging to the Varnock, a feared species known across the galaxy for turning entire planets into hunting grounds. These beings did not conquer for power or resources. They hunted for pride, for sport, and they never chose weak prey. Only those they believed would challenge their strength, so their victory would be something to celebrate. Earth had just made its first small steps into space travel. Telescopes scanned the skies. Satellites orbited, faithfully. But no one saw the Varnock ship as it approached, cloaked in silence. From its dark hull, probes dropped and scattered around the planet, quietly watching. They slipped into Earth's orbit unnoticed, observing cities, communication systems, and the patterns of its people. The conclusion came quickly. The Varnock saw Earth's divided nations, its slow-moving space program, and its outdated weapons. To them, this blue planet wasn't a challenge. It was an opportunity, a perfect place to hunt. Back on Earth at the Northern Hemisphere Observatory, a young linguist named Rena Solari sat hunched over a screen filled with data. While others focused on tracking space rocks and nearby satellites, Rena's passion was different. She listened to space. Not the loud noises of stars or comets, but faint signals, the strange patterned whispers that sometimes drifted in from deep space. That day, her screen flashed something unfamiliar. A low rhythmic pulse repeated in exact intervals. It wasn't natural. It wasn't random. It was a language. But it wasn't human. She brought the signal to her supervisor, but he dismissed it as interference. "Old satellite bouncing noise," he muttered. Rena wasn't convinced. She stayed, late that night recording the signal, analyzing its pattern. Her heart raced. Somewhere out there, something was speaking. Meanwhile, at a hidden military base near the Arctic Circle, Commander Halden Voss reviewed strange satellite reports. They weren't about the signal Rena heard, but rather unexplainable. Blips, vanishing aircraft, strange lights, and brief power surges in remote parts of the globe. Most dismissed them as weather issues or technical glitches, but Halden had seen too many patterns in war to believe in coincidence. He requested more satellite coverage over key zones, particularly rural areas and isolated towns. He didn't know it yet, but he was already chasing ghosts, the first signs of Varnock activity. The attacks began quietly. A small village in the Canadian wilderness vanished. No calls for help, no radio signals, just silence. When a search team arrived, they found nothing but scorched ground and empty houses, torn apart by weapons that left no known trace. No footsteps, no tire tracks, no survivors. It was as if the village had been erased. Then came another disappearance, this time a research station in the Andes, then a fishing town along the Siberian coast. One by one, places across the world went dark. The public didn't notice at first. These were small, quiet places, but Halden Voss noticed. And so did Rena, who realized the signal had changed. It was no longer just background noise. It was increasing in strength, moving closer. At last, the first footage surfaced. A drone, surveying forests in northern Scandinavia, recorded an eerie sight. Tall, armored figures moving between the trees, with terrifying speed. They wore exosuits that bent light, making them nearly invisible. They carried weapons that crackled with energy. One of them raised a hand, and a burst of light turned a truck into molten metal. The drone feed ended seconds later, but the video had already been uploaded. The world saw. The world panicked. News spread like wildfire. Alien life wasn't just real. It was here, and it wasn't friendly. World leaders scrambled to respond. Some called for peace talks, others demanded immediate defense plans. But no, one knew who the enemy was. No signals had been received, no warnings, no faces, just destruction. For Rena and Halden, the signs were no longer isolated clues. They were warnings. The enemy was watching, studying, hunting, and humanity, unprepared and divided, was standing on the edge of something far greater and far more dangerous than anything it had ever faced before. The Varnock, in orbit, smiled with satisfaction. Their scouts had confirmed it. Earth was vulnerable. The hunt could begin. But what they did not understand, what their calculations failed to consider, was that humans had a habit of surprising those who underestimated them. They had risen from caves to cities, from spears to satellites, and now for the first time the people of Earth were waking up to a threat not from each other, but from the stars. And sometimes all it takes for change to begin is a whisper. The first wave hit faster than anyone expected. Entire towns went silent within minutes. No one had time to understand what was happening. In one small mountain village in Nepal, morning started with the scent of burning wood and the chatter of children. By noon, the ground was scorched black, and no voice was left to echo in the valley. All around the world, the Varnock struck quietly and cruelly. They chose the edges first, places that wouldn't make headlines too quickly. Remote settlements, research posts, communities surrounded by wilderness. Earth's leaders were stunned. There had been no declaration of war, no message, no contact, only destruction. Panic began to ripple across the globe. News reports filled screens with shaky videos of glowing weapons, burning forests, and strange figures that moved too fast to follow. For many, it felt like the end. But in the middle of this fear, small sparks of resistance began to glow. A crowded underground lab in Berlin, Dr. Lena Arkwright held a scorched metal shard in her gloved hands. It was part of something the Varnock left behind after an ambush they didn't finish. The fragment hummed with energy, and Lena's eyes widened. She wasn't a soldier, but she was a genius with a deep knowledge of energy systems and biological adaptation. While others saw destruction, she saw opportunity. Her team began working around the clock to understand how the alien metal reacted, how their weapons functioned, and what weaknesses they might have. At the same time, Yasir Jamal sat in a dusty basement in Cairo surrounded by screens. He was once an intelligence analyst but now worked independently, watching satellite feeds and intercepted signals. He had seen the patterns before the world knew what they meant. The Varnock's transmissions were encrypted, but the rhythms, the frequencies, they had structure. Yasir began mapping out communication patterns, building a picture of how the enemy coordinated, moved, and struck. The world was hurting but not helpless. Governments started talking. Quickly. Faster than ever before. Borders stopped mattering. Survival demanded cooperation. The United Global Defense Initiative, a coalition of military and scientific leaders, was born in just 12 days. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Soldiers from once rival nations now trained side by side. Resources were shared. Weapons were adapted. Humanity was learning fast. Captain Noor Javed, a skilled strategist from Lahore, found herself leading a multinational task force assigned to protect urban centers. She was calm, clear-headed, and fiercely respected by her team. What she lacked in advanced alien weapons, she made up for with tactics drawn from Earth's own history. Instead of meeting the Varnock in open battles, where they were far stronger, her team struck from the shadows. They learned quickly that the Varnock didn't understand Earth's diverse environments. Cities, forests, mountains, all became traps. In the Amazon rainforest, a Varnock scouting group disappeared after entering a dense area mapped by human drones. Hidden mines made from scavenged alien tech exploded beneath their feet. Camouflaged fighters moved like ghosts between the trees. Meanwhile, in the alleyways of Istanbul, traffic systems were hacked by Yasir's software, trapping Varnock patrols in narrow roads where explosives were already planted. It wasn't just about fighting back, it was about forcing the Varnock to rethink their image of Earth. Each small victory gave the world a little more hope. Soldiers began returning with captured equipment. Lena's team worked day and night, reverse engineering everything from rifles to armor. Soon they had their first prototype, a plasma weapon adjusted for human hands. It was still clunky and unstable, but it worked. The next step was armor. By studying how the Varnock suits adapted to environmental threats, engineers crafted new body gear that helped human soldiers survive longer in battle. Communication tools were also changing. Using parts pulled from downed Varnock drones, scientists developed secure radio systems that used alien frequencies. These new tools allowed human teams to move without being tracked. It was still a fragile system, but it was enough to confuse the enemy. The world kept changing. Skies once filled with fear now held hope. It was not yet victory, but it was resistance. The tide wasn't turning, but it was beginning to shift. The enemy still had more power, more numbers, and better weapons. But humanity had something else: resolve. And that could not be measured. From war-torn villages to high-tech labs, from bunkers in cold mountains to resistance cells in crowded cities, people everywhere began to believe they could fight back. They were no longer just running. They were planning, preparing, uniting. The Varnock had come expecting an easy hunt. They had expected chaos, and at first that's what they got. But now, from the ashes of their destruction, something new was rising. A global resistance built not on fear, but on the shared belief that Earth was not for the taking. The hunters had made their move. Now it was humanity's turn to answer. The world had changed. The fear that once ruled the hearts of billions had started to fade, replaced by determination. Earth was no longer just defending itself. It was preparing to fight back. The air was still heavy with loss, but the people had found something stronger than fear: purpose. They had survived the first waves. Now they were ready to strike. In an underground base hidden beneath the icy mountains of Norway, a team was being formed. They were called Unit Echo, a hand-picked group of soldiers, engineers, and scouts. Each member had been tested in the early battles. Each had survived encounters no human should have lived through. These were not ordinary fighters. They were trained in silence, strategy, and survival. Their mission was not defense, it was infiltration. Leading them was Commander Dax Marin, a former pilot known for his calm under fire and his ability to see patterns others missed. Dax wasn't loud or flashy, but every person in Unit Echo trusted him completely. He studied the Varnock not just as an enemy, but as a system. He learned their patrol schedules, their code language, even how they processed threats. He knew one truth that would guide their plan: the Varnock did not expect humans to take the fight off-world. Alongside Dax was Elira Knoll, a communications expert who had cracked part of the Varnock's language with the help of alien tech. Her translations allowed the team to hijack and redirect small signals, giving the humans a way to move without setting off alarms. Her work wasn't glamorous, but it was critical. If the enemy didn't see them coming, half the battle was already won. The operation was risky. The plan was simple in theory: enter the Varnock homeworld, sabotage their command systems, and weaken them from within. But the execution, that was a different story. The Varnock planet, known in stolen files as Kovarn, was a fortress. Jagged cliffs, violent weather, and high-tech defenses made it nearly impossible to approach without being spotted. Yet Unit Echo had no choice. If Earth waited too long, the next wave of Varnock attacks might wipe out everything. The journey to Kovarn was quiet. The team traveled in a stolen Varnock vessel, retrofitted with human systems and shielded by cloaking, tech developed by Lena Arkwright's lab. The silence during the flight was filled with focus. Everyone knew what was at stake. No one expected to return the same, if they returned at all. They landed under cover of a storm, far from the central cities in a rocky region filled with caves. The plan was to split into smaller squads, each targeting a different part of the enemy's infrastructure: communications, energy cores, and transport networks. Disrupt everything, confuse them, make them question their control. The first strike came at night when a Varnock patrol moved through a narrow gorge. The humans, hidden among rocks and shadows, set off a timed electromagnetic pulse. The patrol's weapons failed, their suits shut down, and Unit Echo moved in fast. It was clean, quiet. Not a single shot fired. The enemy never had a chance to call for help. Further into the mission, the team found something unexpected. Another species. Locked inside a steel chamber deep underground were beings unlike anything seen on Earth. They were tall with glowing marks on their skin and eyes full of fear. The Varnock had been using them for testing and hunting, treating them like lab animals. Commander Dax gave the order without hesitation. Release them. These new allies, though injured and weak, were eager to help. One of them, who called himself Rojan, spoke in broken phrases but understood the Varnock systems. His help would change everything. With Rojan's guidance, the humans discovered hidden power cores, weak points in their data relays, and blind spots in their surveillance grids. The sabotage missions became faster, more effective. Varnock leaders began noticing the pattern. Systems failed without warning. Patrols vanished. Equipment went missing. Fear crept into their ranks. As confusion spread, Unit Echo struck a major target, an energy vault powering the capital's defense wall. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Alarms echoed across the mountains. The humans didn't wait. They moved to the next target. Back on Earth, the results were immediate. The Varnock response slowed. Attacks became less coordinated. Their arrogance began to crack. And in that crack, hope grew. The Shadow Offensive wasn't just about weapons. It was about changing the story. Earth was no longer the hunted. The Varnock were now looking over their shoulders. They started asking questions. Who are these humans? How did they get here? Why are they winning? Commander Dax sent a final message before the team vanished into the Varnock wildlands. We're not prey, we're the resistance, and we're just getting started. The offensive was working, but the war was far from over. Kovarn was bleeding, but not broken. The next phase would be even more dangerous. Yet something had shifted in the galaxy. The predators had been wounded, and now for the first time they were afraid. The storm had arrived, and now the dust was beginning to settle. The Varnock homeworld Kovarn, once thought to be an unbreakable fortress, was no longer quiet. Flames burned through its black skies. Smoke drifted over shattered towers. Systems flickered with static. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had invaded, sabotaged, and disappeared like shadows. What had begun as a desperate mission had become a symbol of something much greater: rebellion. General Ayla Thorne stood at the edge of a shattered cliff, watching the last transmission from Unit Echo on her command screen. The images showed sabotage, freed prisoners, and Varnock patrols stumbling through their own defense systems like they no longer knew how to fight. Ayla, a calm and deeply focused leader, understood what this meant. The humans weren't just surviving anymore. They were leading a movement that had never existed in the galaxy before. One that dared to fight back against an empire built on fear. Not long after Unit Echo's strike, the message began to spread. Not just through human channels, but across frequencies the Varnock had long suppressed. Rojan, the alien freed during the mission, had sent out a signal in his native tongue, one filled with hope and warning. Across Kovarn, in the hidden corners where other enslaved species lived under the shadow of the Varnock, something shifted. Whispers became voices. Fear turned into courage. Rebellion started not with an army but with a single message: you are not alone. The humans didn't return to Earth right away. Instead, they stayed and supported the rising rebellion. Small teams moved through the dark cities of Kovarn, not with guns blazing, but with quiet purpose. They taught others how to hide from surveillance, how to disable weapons, how to fight back using what little they had. The Varnock, proud and overconfident, had never expected their own slaves to rise against them, let alone be trained by the very species they came to hunt. Inside the central capital, deep beneath the command tower, the Varnock leaders held emergency meetings. Their strongest military minds couldn't agree on what to do. Marshal Tarek, once seen as untouchable, shouted for a total purge of all foreign life forms. Others urged caution, fearing more chaos. But one figure in the room, Elder Vaskal, remained silent until the end. When he finally spoke, his words surprised them all. "We taught the galaxy to fear us," he said slowly, "but perhaps we never learned to listen." His statement was dismissed by many, but some began to wonder if the era of unquestioned dominance had come to an end. The Varnok had believed in strength above all, but now, that very belief had blinded them to what was unfolding. The rebellion was not loud, it was quiet, patient, and it was winning hearts faster than any army. In the coming weeks, the rebellion spread like wildfire. Communications relays were jammed. Food supplies were taken over by rebels. Varnok officers went missing. Their cities, once symbols of order, became playgrounds of confusion. The humans provided just enough technology to help, but never enough to draw too much attention. They guided without leading, supported without controlling. They didn't come to conquer, they came to free. Back on Earth, the effects were just as powerful. With the Varnok focused on their own planet, attacks on Earth had stopped. Cities began to rebuild. Broken infrastructure was restored with salvaged alien tech. Schools reopened, families returned to homes, and most important, people no longer looked up at the stars with fear, but with determination. The final blow came when a joint force of human fighters and rebel allies stormed the Varnok command citadel. It was heavily defended, built into the side of a massive canyon with towers that reached above the clouds. But the humans had learned every inch of its design through captured data and insider knowledge. The battle was intense, but fast. They moved with focus, disabling systems, capturing officers, and broadcasting live footage across Varnok airwaves. The people saw it. Everyone saw it. And then, something no one expected happened. The Varnok requested peace. In a hall that once echoed with orders for destruction, now stood a round table. On one side, General Ayla Thorne and her team. On the other, Varnok elders, some bruised, others silent, all aware that the world they once knew had changed forever. Ayla didn't speak of revenge. She didn't demand surrender. Instead, she offered a future, one where planets would no longer be hunted, one where alliances could replace chains. The treaty was signed days later, not out of fear, but understanding. The galaxy watched as Earth, once seen as weak and primitive, became a symbol of unity and resilience. A place where species once hunted now found safety. A place where a new kind of strength, one rooted in cooperation, creativity, and courage, was born. Years passed. Kovarn changed too. Its skies cleared. Its cities were rebuilt not just by the Varnok, but by all species who once feared them. Together, they forged something better. And Earth, now a respected member of the Galactic Assembly, continued to teach one powerful truth. Even in silence, rebellion can grow. Even in darkness, light can find a way. And even the quietest voice, when joined by others, can shake an empire.